How's it going, guys? My name is Fallinghurts, and today this is going to be my 2021 review for The Beast Inside. Upon its initial release on October 17th, 2019, it was developed by Illusion Ray Studio, and it was a Kickstarter. It is a Polish developer, and the big emphasis was on the photogrammetry tech that was used to scan in objects for the game world. And for a price to time comparison, I did pay $24.99, which is full price for this game in US dollars, and I played about 7 hours and I completed the game. So if you think that's a little short, then maybe I can go ahead and tell you to just wait for a sale. But if you're a horror gamer, then you're definitely going to want to continue watching this video. The Beast Inside is an interesting blend of both survival horror and thriller narratives. Two different characters work as the protagonists, one in the quote-unquote present day, which is the Cold War, and that is Adam, a U.S. codebreaker, and then he is also finding notes and reading and reliving the experiences of Nicholas, who lives in the same house back way long time ago, and he's living through similar paralleled experience, and that is how the horror narrative continues. So with Adam, the main protagonist, you are going to get mostly more of a walking simulator and a puzzle experience. Being a codebreaker, they actually do kind of work that into his story a bit, and a lot of it runs on a goose chase, looking out for Soviets, trying to find him, and that is what a lot of the narrative is. I don't want to say spoilers because there's a lot that goes on in both of these stories. I'm going to try to keep it light, and honestly, the best way I can explain the vibes or nature I got from Adam's storyline was Firewatch. I felt while looking around that paranoia was taken to a whole new level and very human, if we're being honest. And if you don't believe me, there are even some references to Firewatch at one point in the game, and I'll post that screenshot now. And I suppose since I only have one other screenshot I captured of a, reference or anything, here's another one. See if you can guess or find what it is. But moving into the other character, Nicholas, who lives in the same house previously, he will give you your survival horror elements entirely. It is with him that you'll feel like sometimes you're playing Outlast, you're playing Amnesia, all the while trying to uncover some murders that your father may or may not have committed, and it's a pretty interesting little story. Okay, now that you know the basic premise for the game and the settings that this is taking place in, let's talk about our first subject, and that is the visuals. A lot of people are coming to this game because it's a, quote, good-looking horror game, and to put it plainly, that's true, but I'm going to go into a little more. First off, the lighting does play into the game's strength really well. When it's dark, and it's going to force you to use light in certain occasions, but also it's never going to leave you completely stranded. The big draw for a lot of people, the photogrammetry tech, is very good. There are many assets. The trees especially look really good. The level of detail looks good on a lot of things, but one thing I will say is that it does feel like a lot of assets do get reused in scenarios quite a few times. One bad thing that I do have to say is that the faces and character models don't really hold up too well. I think they were probably even pretty dated for the time, but that's the budget constraint of a Kickstarter, if we're being honest, and I'm not going to fault them for that. But on a final note, it's not necessarily graphics, but I don't know exactly how else to put this in a different category, but the locations are very well crafted, like the home environments and anything like that. But another thing that's very nice to note is that the small details changing between chapters, because there are 13 chapters in the game, and it swaps back and forth between the two characters every chapter. And sometimes when you go from one chapter and split to, like, say, chapter 1 to 3, and you're playing the same character, there's going to be some minor details that are different, and it's very refreshing. Okay, next up, we can talk about the sound for a second, and the big thing that you're going to be hearing a lot of in this game is the voiceover. Honestly, it's hit or miss. The two main protagonists, I think Adam sounds really good most of the time, where Nicholas, I think, sounds kind of corny, but they both have high and low moments. Like, there's points when I think that Adam's delivery is not so good, but then there's points where I think Nicholas delivers really well, so I can see why they had both of these people playing the protagonist. As for everyone else, it's really not that good, but the protagonist got most of the talent, I would say. One huge pro that I can say for the sound department is the music. The soundtrack is very tension building. I mean, you'll get a couple reused tracks here and there, but every time you hear that track, you know shit's about to go down. General sound effects as a whole are alright. I have a real problem with kind of judging these. I did the same thing in Enderall. Other than that, I can really just say that there are some missing sound effects. Like one time during a chase sequence, I remember I was running across a waterfall, and I realized that the only sounds were my footsteps. There was no waterfall sounds. That's just one example I can give. There are other missing sound effects throughout the game, but it's not super present at all times, so don't feel like that's an issue. And the visuals and the sounds do lead me to my next topic of discussion, and that is the spooky, scary scares. I think this game has incredible atmosphere, especially when it puts its mind to work and actually does it properly. This game is really good in that essence, and it delivers on that promise 100%. It is a little overly reliant on jump scares at times, but for people that are scared of that, that's going to be something that's going to be omnipresent throughout the entire game. Like I said previously, those environmental changes, a lot of times they're used for horror, and like the decay of life in a certain area, and that works really well to kind of add to the themes as well. And of course, you'll get chase sequences, you'll get jump scares, you'll get all of the works. But one thing that I think is the most important thing that a developer can do is a moment that you can completely miss if you're not paying attention. There are plenty of times, and I'll post a screenshot here, where if you're not looking, you're not going to see the creature, the ghost, the monster, whatever it is. And I think that's so great because they just disappear if you go past, or, sometimes they'll just be there for a second off in the distance. And to me, that's the scariest kind of horror. The assumed horror, I guess, if that makes sense. Okay, we can talk about the gameplay mechanics a little bit. This game plays a lot like Amnesia with the physics-based system. You can pick things up, rotate them, throw them, a lot of that, as well as a lot of other interesting and not so interesting gameplay mechanics that go along with it. And without getting into too much of spoilers, there are situations where you are going to have a scanner and you have to look around the environment for different story elements or to guide you forward, and I gotta say that's one of the most boring things ever. And once I got the achievement saying I'd done every one of them, and it was only like 2/3 of the way through the game, I was so happy about that. I think the developer knew that they couldn't do it anymore. With things like that, as well as situations where you might have a gun and are shooting, the game feels like it introduces a lot of mechanics. At certain times, it's only for one chapter, and like I said, there are 13 chapters. So the game really gives off the jack of all trades, master of none mentality. I really think something like the shooting actually could have been cut for polish purposes. Another big gripe I have with some of the gameplay mechanics is that while the survival horror works really well, when there isn't a weapon, might I add, as Nicholas, you are collecting both matches to light, candles and stuff like that to light the way, as well as lamp oil to keep your lamp going. So two, like, resource managers, but my issue is you find too much of it throughout the world. And you're never in one place for too long enough to where you're going to need to light candles. You can just move on. So I think maybe if they're going to do something like that similarly later on in a different game down the road, then they can, kind of lower that number just a little bit. Another mechanic that is in the game is the QuickTime event, or the QTE as I might call it, and that adds another level of agency for the player, I think, overall, but it feels really slow and clunky almost 99% of the time. And it's really simple. There's only left click, right click, or mash left click. So, not really too much to think about while you're doing it either. Another player agency moment is the chase scenes, and I said previously that they feel a lot like Outlast, and that's 100% the case. You're just running from them. You can't do nothing to them. During these scenes, you just got to run from the enemy and hope you live. And let me tell you, there's a few times I ran around to see if they were even catching up with me, and oh, yes, they were. Overall, though, I would say that the gameplay mechanics kind of hinder themselves and the game a little bit in its full potential, but at times they do add to the horror very well. Last topic of discussion I have for this review is the actual story itself, and while I have alluded to kind of a little bit of the plot that's going on with Adam and Nicholas, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it now, but I promise you there will be no major spoilers in this talk. To start out with my biggest criticism, I gotta say that the pacing is absolutely atrocious in this game. I'm not a writer, I'm not a story, person. I don't know how this could be fixed, if I'm being honest, other than the fact that the jump from character to character forced in between chapters, it feels like it does kind of take away from some of the build-up in certain chapters, especially towards the end of the game. But to focus on the specific characters for a second, Adam, the present-day character, he has all the puzzles, and they make you feel pretty smart when you accomplish them. I never had any that I was completely stuck on, but, unless it was something super, super simple, I usually just had to think about it for a second. And other than that, though, walking in between and scanning, like I said, the scan from earlier, that was all really extremely boring. Nicholas, on the other hand, has one of the best starting chapters for a character, and then has a terrible second chapter. And then it continues on and is just amazing. It's good play for Nicholas throughout. He has good survival horror elements when it isn't marred by completely bad AI. And for each of these characters, there is an end choice, a pretty much good or bad ending, and I'm not sure if there's 8 different outcomes due to the fact that you can choose good or bad for one, but for the most part, it really does seem like it's just tacked on at the end. I wish there would have been a certain choice throughout the game that you could have made rather than just, oh, I want the good or the bad ending at the end. And due to the faster nature of the final chapters, the story does come away feeling a little fragmented, if that makes sense. I do think the parallels that they tried to draw between the two characters work really well, but I do think it feels a little shoehorned at the end when they're trying to shove it all in your face to make these final decisions. My absolute final verdict on this game is that horror and thriller fans can both find joy in The Beast Inside. The price for the playtime and content is just fine if you're going to enjoy horror. If it's something that you're a little more interested in, it's not really up your alley, maybe wait for a sale. Steam sales happen all the time, and the game does go down for a lot cheaper than it normally is. There's a lot of great game here once you can get past the jank. That's part of the fun. You get a good 80s slasher vibe. There's also things that you hope for an improvement on in a potential sequel or the developer's next game. So overall, I would recommend this game. But if you're not a die-hard horror fan, wait for a sale. Otherwise, I think it's a good price point. It's not too much for the content. I think it's actually really good. There are difficulty settings to make the next playthrough more engaging if that's what you like. So yeah, play this game, support the developer. And with that being said, I was checking on the developer's website, and they are doing a sequel. The Beast Inside 2 is taking place in London in 1888 and promises some involvement of Jack the Ripper. But that is all I have for this review. Thank you guys so much for watching it. I hope I was able to make this into a cohesive idea. If this helped at all or anything like that, leave a like, and thanks for watching. Go ahead and subscribe.